Hello everyone. Tonight, um, it's not a somber occasion, really. You know, had a little bit of time to think about what happened with Mike Tyson, and it went about as good as it could go for him. We're going to talk about the Mike Tyson Jake Paul situation. We're also going to talk about Absolute Batman. We're going to talk about Dragon Ball Daima episode 6, and we're also going to talk a little bit about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Last Ronin 2, because I'm just getting around to reading all of this stuff because it was sitting in a box for a month and a half. The comic book shop actually called me at work and was like, you got a bunch of stuff here. I was like, yeah, come and get it. So I did, and almost cried at the amount of money I had to pay to get all this stuff that I had ordered because I skipped a couple of weeks because of YumaCon, so I didn't go to the comic book shop, so stuff piled up on me. But I have the final volume of Parasite, but I haven't read it yet. So I'll probably do a complete story of Parasite once I read the final volume. Then I'll probably watch the manga. I'll probably read the anime. Read the anime. Watch the anime too, because I haven't finished the anime of Parasite. I saw it on, I think it was on Cartoon Network for a time. So I want to do like a complete thing on Parasite, but we'll get around to it. I also had the first volume of Kagurabachi. That'll probably be next week, along with the final volume of Parasite. Um, I also have the 39th volume of My Hero Academia, which I also have not read yet. So we're going to get to that stuff. And I'm probably going to end up canceling Gunslinger Spawn, which I don't really want to because I like Gunslinger Spawn. But we're veering off into I don't know what's going on anymore. Um, and the action has diminished, where there's a lot of too much talking in these books. This is just a American comic book situation. But let's start with Logan Paul and Mike Tyson. For starters, Katie Taylor and Amanda Serrano had an excellent fight on the undercard. It was one hell of a fight where Amanda Serrano took a nasty headbutt. Um, and and there was a great deal of punishment dished out between the two of them, and they really had a hell of a fight, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I really don't even like women's MMA or women's boxing, but they did great. But this fight, Serrano versus Taylor, it reminded me of why I'm not a huge fan of boxing, and that is because the referees or the judges going against what you actually see with your own eyes is pretty nonsensical. I have yet to meet anybody who really thought Katie Taylor won the fight. I think the only person I actually saw who thinks that Katie Taylor really won that fight was Alicia Baumgartner, who is another boxer, who says that a lot of Serrano's punches were being blocked, um, which might be true. She's a trained boxer and probably knows what she's looking at. But I know from my eyeballs, there is no way that Katie Taylor lost a point for holding in round 8 and still managed to win the fight. It's just that was something. So let's go into the Mike Tyson Jake Paul thing because it was a fiasco. Everybody thought it was going to be a work and ended up being somewhat of a work. Somewhat. The Netflix stream was awful. It was so bad that I actually just started watching it. Well, I don't have Netflix as it is, so but I went from watching somebody who was streaming the Netflix version to somebody who was streaming illegally, just so you can watch the whole thing. So the Netflix buffering was awful. The quality of the product was no good. Everything about it was an absolute failure. Um, the commentary, I mean, you had Rosie Perez. Like, what? Why is Rosie Perez doing commentary on a boxing fight? You had Mauro Ranallo. Look, Mauro Ranallo does boxing, So it wasn't out of the realm of common sense for him to be there. I'm just not a huge fan of Mauro Ranallo. He's very knowledgeable. He's good at his job. I'm just not a fan. Cedric the Entertainer, he was dressed like Noble Drew Ali. I have no idea why he was there. Roy Jones Jr., and Morrow going back and forth during the fight. That was a better fight than what was going on in the ring. It was pretty nonsensical. But the fight was a simple one, and it was exactly what everybody thought it was going to be. And that was in terms of Mike Tyson is 58 years old. He looks fantastic for 58. But he's 58, So you look at him and he looks like a tank. He looked fantastic. But once he had to actually start moving, it wasn't so good. The first round, Jake Paul's tactics were obvious, and maybe the first 2 rounds, I think Mike wore himself out. So essentially, Mike actually chased Jake Paul a little bit in the first round, and Jake Paul utilized the clinch when Mike got too close, and of course he stayed on the outside using the jab, which is exactly what you would think. And Tyson tagged him in the second round a little bit. Some people think that Mike pulled back after the second round just to let Jake. And I'm like, no way. Mike couldn't chase him anymore. He was flat-footed. He couldn't really move. He was basically a punching bag after that. Jake Paul did us all a favor by not knocking out Mike Tyson. And he didn't really have to do that much, even if he doesn't have a great deal of strength. By only scoring points and staying away, he prolonged the fight a lot longer than he probably should have, considering Mike was a tank, but he just couldn't keep up. There's nothing you can do. Father Time is no jabroni. All right. That's all it boils down to. The idea that it went 8 rounds is pretty nonsensical. Mike wasn't really all that much hurt from the fight, but he couldn't land anything because he couldn't catch the guy. There's nothing he could do. So some people think, Jake Paul let Mike have his pride because he didn't knock him out and embarrass him. Some people think Jake Paul was a pussy because, he didn't finish the fight when he could have. And so he just kind of prolonged beating up on old man Mike Tyson. It's hard to feel sympathy for Mike Tyson because he went in there at least leading everybody to believe that he was going to fight and could fight. Maybe his body had different ideas, and that's entirely true. But for me, I don't think this fight ever should have been sanctioned in the first place because Mike Tyson is so old. So it made no sense to me that this fight would even be sanctioned. Everybody is basically trolling Jake Paul to fight somebody for real, a real boxer. And he's never going. I don't think I explained already that I don't think he's ever going to do that. I don't think he's ever going to take himself seriously and fight a serious boxer. Because if anything, this proved is that he doesn't have any killer instinct. And he was still scared of Mike Tyson, even though Mike Tyson was 60 years old. That's why he would spent almost the whole first round running away. So it is what it is. We're going to watch John Jones and Stipe Miocic tonight. It ought to be a better fight. At least I hope it is. I was very frustrated because Mike Tyson didn't get to the ring until midnight. And the event started at 8 o'clock. And that was another thing that kind of worked against Mike is, they're fighting at midnight and the guy's 60. I'm 20 years younger than Mike Tyson, and I was up beyond my bedtime, So I was grumbling at like 11:30. They were like, "Oh, the fight's gonna start in 30 minutes." I'm like, "Why? Why on earth is there a 30-minute gap between the last fight and the next fight?" You know? Oh, they want to sell concessions. Well, maybe that's the toxic capitalism that all the socialists talk about. You got to stay up all night to watch what we want to see because these people want to sell more beer and hot dogs or whatever. I don't think they sell food. I never seen anybody eating at UFC shows or boxing shows. There's almost always drinking. So maybe that is just more beer, more alcohol. Make the crowd rowdier. But you're not giving people their money's worth by making them wait 30 minutes in between fights. That's not giving people their money's worth. It's piss poor pacing, which I really always had a problem with when it comes to boxing. Is it takes forever. But this fight, the fight between Jake Paul and Mike Tyson, could have went 6 rounds, but it ended up going the full 8. And of course, Jake Paul won by unanimous decision. Father Time is not a jabroni. I don't think anybody realistically thought Mike Tyson could win. I mean, there's obviously some people who thought he realistically could win. Because Jake Paul is not a real fighter. Because Jake Paul has never had a real fight. Not a real fight, not against somebody who's trained to do the boxing. Not, MMA fighters who are in their 40s, but somebody who's young and in their prime. He's likely never going to have that fight. And Mike Tyson hasn't won a fight in 20 years. Jake Paul was in 1st grade the last time Mike Tyson won a fight. That's how long it's been. Jake Paul was in 1st grade the last time Mike Tyson won a fight. So everybody's giving Jake Paul shit. I mean, I understand, but they said somewhere between 65 to 150 million people watched the fight. It absolutely crashed the servers for Netflix. People was pissed at the Netflix coverage. A lot of people were like, "Oh, how is Raw going to look?" I don't know if it was the streaming capabilities of Netflix that was the problem, or it was just the amount of pressure because 150 million people, I think globally, was watching the fight. So it's hard to tell. But the fight was, of course, a disaster. It was the shits. We didn't get what we came to see, which is a fight. It wasn't really ever even competitive because the only time Mike was really dangerous was the 1st round and a half, really. And once Jake Paul had decided he was going to stay away and clinch if Mike ever did actually catch up with him, just to drain his energy, and then Mike's legs went away and it was over. And at that point, that was it. I don't even understand how I actually lost interest in like the 3rd or 4th round. I finished watching the fight because I had stayed up all that time to see it, but it was academic at that point. It wasn't really a question of what's happening. It was more of how is the fight going to end, or is Jake Paul going to drag this guy to a decision, which is exactly what they decided to do, was drag him to a decision. Mike actually did look better against Roy Jones than he looked here, but Roy Jones was also washed, so that was a little bit more even though Roy Jones, I think, is younger. He was significantly younger. It was a little bit more even when he was fighting Roy Jones. But this fight versus Jake Paul was ridiculous. Jake Paul's not even 30. So there was nothing he could do. Even if he'd landed a really good punch, he probably couldn't have the legs to land a knockout punch because and Mike his defensively, at least in the beginning, he was fine. He was slipping well, he was doing everything, but again, only like a round and a half was he actually a threat. After that, physically, his heart was in it, but his legs weren't. His legs were gone. Even mentally, if he still wanted to to get there, his legs wasn't going to let him go. And I think it was a great lesson for all of us who live in the past that sometimes we need to leave the past in the past. You know, there's a lot of people like, oh, Mike Tyson is, destroying his legacy. He's a lot like, I saw people saying it was like Muhammad Ali versus, oh shit, his name's slipping my mind, Larry Holmes. And it wasn't like that because Larry Holmes beat the shit out of Muhammad Ali. So it wasn't like that. And plus, they was a lot closer in age than Jake Paul and Mike Tyson were. You know, it wasn't the same, but it was similar in so much as, and plus, I wouldn't say that Larry Holmes, who was a world champion, is like in the same league as Jake Paul. You just look at it like sometimes fighters go too long. They often go too long. You know, boxing and mixed martial arts are one of the two sports where, unlike the NFL, unlike the NBA, nobody's going to step in and stop you. You know, it's like pro wrestling in that way, where you can be 40-4 and then, be a former world champion and all that stuff. Physically, you're shot to shit, but you're a name and you need money, or you may just want the money, like Joe Louis or Muhammad Ali, Evander Holyfield. And if the athletic commissions are okay with you fighting, then you fight and you get your ass kicked. You take beatings that you don't need to take because there's nobody that's going to stop you. As long as somebody's willing to book you, you can do it. In the NFL, there are no 58-year-old NFL players. Bro, you'd be hard pressed to find a 42-year-old NFL player. You'd be hard pressed to find a 35-year-old NFL player. Like, it just doesn't happen. The NBA, what LeBron James is doing now, I think he's in his 40s, it's really rare. You almost never see it in the NBA. In team sports, you almost never see this kind of stuff. But in boxing and mixed martial arts, because it's fighting, you'll see these guys going to their 48, 49, 50. Mike Tyson's 58 years old. And I think when I mentioned it in the preview that Ken Shamrock continued to fight, believing that he was still the world's most dangerous man, even when he could barely go 2 rounds with anybody, completely destroyed his legacy for a lot of people, because mixed martial arts was not really a big deal when Ken Shamrock, ruled the world. It wasn't what it is now. So a lot of people saw Ken Shamrock and they saw him washed, losing at B and C shows to other guys who are washed. Like him getting beat up by, Tito Ortiz, and stuff like that. And you say, my God, you used to think this guy was great, but physically just don't got it anymore. What can you do? So I'm not surprised at how it went. It was a sensible decision to just accept that Jake Paul was going to win the fight. It wasn't. There was no. What was that Rocky movie? Rocky 6. You just want to see the old guy be competitive, but he couldn't even do that. He couldn't even be competitive because he couldn't catch the kid. So it was what it was. So that's that. I'm gonna talk about Dragon Ball Daima in a second, but let's see what you guys have to say about this. Mike Tyson versus Jake Paul. Stone Mexican guy said Mike Tyson got a Tony Khan payday. I'm happy he made all that money. Yes, he made $20 million. He made $20 million to get jabbed a bunch. There wasn't that many power punches landed on Mike. And like Stone Mexican guy says, he didn't even get knocked down. He just stood there and took it. Again, he was a tank. He looked great, but he couldn't move. He couldn't do much of anything. And a lot of people was like, well, his training videos look great. Like I'm sure they were, but the legs are a completely different part of the body than the brain and the chest and the arms and the back. And he had the technique. If Mike Tyson was 10 years younger, I think Jake Paul would have been in trouble. But he wasn't. He was 58 years old, and he's an old man. And again, I'm not even that old. And I remember I ran one time 2 weeks ago. My foot has hurt since. Wake up with a stiff foot. You realize you're not 25. You're not, even 30. When you're a little bit older and you're not used to doing this stuff, not used to running and all that, it doesn't work. So it's just father time catching up. It's nothing special. Big Boss says the fight was terrible, but that fight have the most views. That is absolutely true. Ike Daima says, I like what Andre Ward said. Might look good cosmetically, but his engine not going to run the same as 1989 Mike. That is absolutely facts. It's as if you took an old car and you took all the engine and the carburetor and everything out and you just put it in a museum. That's how Mike Tyson looked. He looked phenomenal. And I think that tricked a lot of people. It was like, oh my God, look at him. He looks great. And then you have to remember you're being tricked. You're being hustled here. He's 60. He's 60. And he was talking about back in June, and I think Mike said this himself. He was, he had the ulcer thing, and he lost 25 pounds and a bunch of other stuff, and he had all these medical and health-based issues. And you're like, under no circumstances, any athletic commission, if they were legit, and this is why I say, government, you can't trust it. The Texas State Athletic Commission let this guy box at 60 years old. Are you serious? What did you think was going to happen? That he was going to turn back time? The only chance he really had is one punch. I knew he was, even with the shorter time of 2 minutes per round, he was not going to be able to chase Jake Paul for 2 minutes or, for 20 minutes. It just wasn't going to happen. So it was nonsense and it shouldn't have even occurred, but I'm glad he made his $20 million. That was great. AJ3 says, this is like if Bret Hart came out retirement and wrestled Zack Sabre Jr. and see who's the best wrestler in the world. I hate that you said Zack Sabre Jr., but yeah, you're right. Similar to how some of Bryan Danielson's last few matches have been, where physically he's there, but they ain't the same as they used to be. Want to see Jake Paul versus Drake? Why? Big Boss said, what was the reason Mike versus Paul, Jake, every round was 2 minutes? That was what they agreed upon. It seemed like that might have been the best option for both parties. And just to get it in the ring, have some action, but get out of there quickly. The earlier fights were 2 minute rounds too. I believe Serrano and Taylor were also 2 minute rounds. I think Mauro Ranallo tried to explain it as if to say that the 2 minute rounds were to increase the action. I think that was the psychology of it. But I'm not sold on that. Would I be up for a Jake Paul versus Joe Biden fight? Actually, I'm not up for any more Jake Paul fights if he's not going to fight anybody legitimate. I just don't see the reason why we keep having these freak show fights. I didn't see any of them before this, and I watched this one because of Mike Tyson. But I'm not interested in Jake Paul's fighting career. If he fights somebody legitimate, then maybe I'll watch him box. But he just challenged Conor McGregor, I think, earlier today. Saying he wants to do MMA with Conor McGregor. Like it goes to what I said before. These dudes are doing whatever it takes to try to increase their profile. Now he wants Conor McGregor to give him the rub, you know? And it's like there's plenty of MMA fighters that you could fight if you want to fight MMA. Why do you want to fight Conor McGregor? Conor McGregor is washed. Conor McGregor is in his 40s. He's not an elite level fighter anymore. He doesn't want to fight anybody that might actually hurt him. This is brand management levels of fighting. These guys, again, they've hacked this thing. They hacked it. They watched Floyd Mayweather, wait until Shane Mosley was old and then beat the shit out of him. And look, Floyd had some competitive fights, but Floyd was known to fight people once they were washed up. It happens sometimes, when you don't really know that the guy ain't got it no more. Like when Lennox Lewis fought Mike Tyson, he didn't know Mike Tyson was washed at that time. That was like 1999 or something. He didn't know he was that washed at the time, but he very quickly learned, and that's why Mike's opponents after Lennox Lewis weren't at the same level, because he couldn't compete on that level anymore. But he was still a draw. It's the exact same trajectory that you saw with people like Ken Shamrock and Joe Louis and etc. Muhammad Ali. Once you fall out of being an elite level fighter, you're basically just trading on your name at that point, and you're giving the rub to younger guys. And Mike Tyson got paid $20 million to give Jake Paul the rub, and he did it. So, not really too upset about that. AJ3 says boxing was never the same after Mike Tyson. They had a vendor, Holyfield, and Roy Jones, and they were no good. Brian Moore. I guess they bring more Latino boxers, and they kept it alive. What went wrong today? Well, the problem is that Americans only really care about the heavyweight division. Like boxing is still extremely popular in Mexico, extremely popular in Europe, but for a long time here in the States, after Roy Jones, when the Klitschko brothers were the champions, that was a dark period for boxing in the United States, because who gives a fuck about these Eastern European guys with no personality? They barely smiled, let alone laughed. They didn't have any personality. They were machines. Nobody could beat them. They were winning on points and all kind of shit like that. They were boxing, It was like if the NBA all became Eastern European basketball players, it might be great for the league because they might be technically good players, but you will see the entire fan base just leave, because part of the game isn't just the love of the game, but also the personalities that are involved with the game. And since Americans don't give a shit about middleweights and light heavyweights and all that kind of stuff, Floyd Mayweather managed to be a big deal mainstream, but he's one of the very few that has actually done that, being in the lighter weight classes. Americans like the heavyweight boxing because we like knockouts and all that kind of shit, right? But Manny Pacquiao and Floyd Mayweather were anomalies in terms of lighter guys. That's what happened. After Roy Jones, there weren't any flashy heavyweights anymore. They all became highly technical. And then maybe Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder, those guys maybe brought boxing back because Wilder was more of a personality. He reminded everybody a lot of a young. They tried to manufacture him to be Mike Tyson. And Tyson Fury had a lot of charisma and personality, but ultimately, once boxing went, once Lennox Lewis became the champion, and that transition to the Klitschko brothers and all that European shit, people just kind of lost interest in main event boxing, even though Roy Jones did become very popular for a time. You think Mike Tyson became washed after Holyfield beat him? Yeah, I think once he couldn't figure out, he might have actually been washed before that, but I think the Holyfield thing really exposed him, and because he could still fight, but he couldn't figure out how to stop Holyfield, and he got so frustrated, and he was so addled and he became such a caricature. Yeah, you know, um, he leaned more into his personality because physically he couldn't really go anymore. But I think it almost became like a pro wrestling kind of thing. Mike Tyson started saying weird stuff like, telling people he's gonna fuck them until they love him, or all this kind of weird stuff that he was saying, and he's gonna eat somebody's children. He started getting really over the top. He went real pro wrestling with it at that point in time, and it was so insane that it was like it was crazy watching Sports Center during those days. But he went real pro wrestling with it, like physically when he couldn't go anymore, and his fights he wasn't really all that competitive as a heavyweight anymore. He leans more into the mythology of Mike Tyson being a psychopath, and that still got people interested in his fights. And it happened again over this course of this weekend. Everybody got used to Mike Tyson being a psycho. And he's a psycho with some real strength, some real power. And people was like, hey, a crazy person with some real strength, no matter the age, is dangerous. But then you have to realize this is a structured environment with rules. And Jake Paul just played by the rules. I mean, it is what it is. Travis Tippin says Jake fight some legit. He going to get beat down. Yeah, that's true. Najee Savage says Jake Paul is the biggest loser from this fight. Thankfully, the bloom is finally off the rose. Yeah, I think that he. I think a lot of people have. That's why he's trying to do the Conor McGregor thing in mixed martial arts, because I don't think he can get this level of boxing anymore. I think he's reached a peak where he's grifted to the point where he can't get higher than this. There's nobody in boxing with the name that Mike Tyson has that's willing to give him the rub, that's willing to get in there and fight him. I don't see anybody doing that. So now he's basically saying, okay, well, I'll just do the same thing in MMA. I'll fight Conor McGregor. It's like, if you really want to be a boxer, there's tons of boxers for you to fight, bro. The thing now is that Jake Paul has built his own name up. He's not going to risk going in there and getting knocked out. I mean, I think if worse comes to worse, he probably would do it, but that'll be the end of his boxing grift. Kind of like what happened with Logan Paul, but he was doing the boxing grift. He got to a certain point where you can't go any higher than this, and you've topped this grift out. Now you got to go to the next thing. Now, Logan Paul is pro wrestling, and now Jake Paul wants to do mixed martial arts. They're very smart guys, man. You have to give them credit. You can hate them as much as you want. This is the United States. We make grifters very, very rich in this country. And there's positives to that and there's negatives to that. And the negatives is these guys are not the best people, I guess you could say. They aren't, salt to the earth, generous folks, but they're not total devils either. They're not actively out harming people. They're creating a mutually beneficial situation. Jake Paul and Mike Tyson created a mutually beneficial situation where Mike did not get hurt. He took some jabs, but that was about it. No, he didn't get knocked down, spit on, or anything like that. He didn't get dehumanized like he may have if he'd tried to fight a real boxer. If he'd tried to fight, somebody with some real skill and some real ability, he wouldn't have made it 2 rounds. Because that dude would have let Mike Tyson punch himself out, and then he would have destroyed him and humiliated him. So it was a mutually beneficial agreement where they both walked away millions of dollars. Mike didn't really hurt his pride because he's 60. Everybody's giving him credit for even getting in that kind of shape and getting in the ring at 60. Because most of them can't even figure that they're going to do it at 40. There's a lot of guys who are my age that can't even really survive the grocery store. All right, you have to carry too many jugs of water. You're gonna need a salt bath, So people are giving him tons of credit for what he did. It was a mutually beneficial situation. It's a hustle though, because the only victims are the people who believed in it. It's pro wrestling. The only victims are the people who believe that this was a legitimate fight, which it wasn't. It was never going to be that because Mike Tyson can't fucking fight. He's 60. So there's that. Yeah, Mike legs were gone. You know, Travis Tippin said he's 35. He gets random back pain. Yeah, I saw a dude in the grocery store today, man. Had to carry a couple of cases of water. Needed to take a break in between carrying the water from his cart to his car, you know? And he looked like he was about my age. He may have a couple of more grays than I did. And it's like, yo, we ain't 60. And that dude, I'm pretty sure he was so thankful he only bought 2 or 3 cases of water. WG feels that, is this worse than WrestleMania 30 or Super Showdown 2019 Taker? It was about the same level as Undertaker Roman WrestleMania 33, where Taker is there physically, but he's in the building, but his body won't allow him to do anything. You know, and that's kind of how Mike Tyson was, where physically he was in position. He could fight if Jake Paul was stupid and stood right in front of him. They could have had a hell of a fight, I guess. But Jake Paul was not stupid. He was just going to stand in front of him and let Mike Tyson throw punches at his head. I mean, that was dumb. You know, it just wasn't going to work. You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube, right? You can't turn back the clock. You can't turn back time. It is what it is. You said people stopped paying attention to heavyweight boxers once Floyd popped up. And yeah, part of that was Floyd's charisma, his personality, but it was also the fact that a lot of the heavyweight boxing became mostly Eastern European, English, kind of thing. And boxing is huge in Mexico. They don't really care about weight classes because the Mexicans don't really dominate the heavyweight division. It's always the lighter weight classes. And Mexico, they absolutely love boxing. You know, but boxing is the king of sports still. You know, they sold out AT&T Stadium. They sold it out, which was 70,000 some odd seats. It was a successful event, and nobody got hurt. Think about that. Mike Tyson probably would have got hurt more if he had a wrestling match than he did having that fight. If Mike Tyson decided he was going to wrestle John Cena, it probably would have hurt him a lot more than having that match with Jake Paul. And do I think that was by design, that was the work that Jake Paul was like, oh, yeah, I'm not going to hit you too hard? Maybe. But we will never know for sure. But the work was in already because he's fighting a guy who's 60 years old, so he can't lose unless he's stupid. AJ3 says, what is it with people wanting to fight guys when they're washed and broke in bad shape and not at their best? Is it really about the money? It's money and his ego. You know, it's money and his ego. Jake Paul he's a pretty good grifter. You gotta give him credit for that. But he's all about creating spectacles. You know, I said it a couple of days ago. Like, these guys are all about getting attention and ever increasing attention. So they keep doing things that are more and more risky, more and more dangerous. But they want to be able to mitigate that danger. You know, it's like when the old wrestlers used to want to wrestle bears, but they want to make sure the bear has been defanged and declawed. Like, oh, yeah, I want to wrestle the bear, but the bear needs to be trained, defanged, declawed, and somebody's got to be there with a tranquilizer gun just in case the bear loses their mind. It's like, okay, at that point, are you really wrestling a bear? You know, like, all the dangers of wrestling a bear is gone. You know, you must wrestle a teddy bear at that point. And that's essentially what happens in the real world now and I love that Dana White is the kind of guy who doesn't really play into that, because he had so many opportunities that he could have threw somebody in there and done freak show fights, and he really rarely does it. I think the CM Punk thing and the James Toney situation was the only two times that he had really done like crazy freak show shit. And I guess the Brock Lesnar, initial Brock Lesnar, but he made Brock um, prove himself first. But Dana White's the kind of guy who understands what he's doing. He's trying to build mixed martial arts, and he wants mixed martial arts to have a level of credibility. And he knows that he destroys that level of credibility if he does freak show shit, because these freak show fights is hurting boxing. It is. It's making a mockery out of the sport. But it's so highly individual that a lot of the people who make money are going to be like, I don't really care. Like Canelo Alvarez is not going to be hurt by this. Floyd Mayweather, exhibitions or whatever aren't really going to be hurt by this. But there's going to be a lot of other guys who, whose careers may be hurt or harmed by this thing. X9 said the women should have main evented. I'm not going to say that, because I'm pretty sure if the women had main evented, it went a little bit differently. People in the building probably wouldn't have stopped watching it. But the people who are watching on Netflix would have just turned it off after Tyson and Jake Paul, if we be honest. How big Tommy Hearns in Detroit? It's a pretty big deal. There aren't any statues of him, and there probably should be. There aren't any murals either, and it probably should be. In fact, I don't even think the Kronk Gym is even in Detroit anymore. I think it's on the other side of the suburb now. But it goes back to what I was saying before about lighter weight class guys. People should absolutely have a Tommy Hearns arena or something. You got a Joe Louis arena. He wasn't even originally. He lived here, but he wasn't like originally from Detroit. He was originally from like Kentucky or Tennessee or something. X9 says Tyson versus Wheeler Yuta. All right. Najee Savage says, sadly, this all started during the pandemic when the YouTubers' rap careers didn't take off. I didn't even peep that. I didn't know they tried rapping, But music is almost always one of the hustles people try to get into. They try to do music, or they try to do restaurants and stuff like that. That shit always falls through TV shows. But now they making a mocking of boxing and mixed martial arts and shit. But they got money. Like these guys, they have the money where they could start leagues. They could start a mixed martial arts league. They have them. Jake Paul made more money in one night than the guys who originally owned the UFC has ever had. Like he made $40 million in one fight. The guys who started UFC didn't have that kind of money. So he could, if he wanted to, start a new MMA promotion. He could start a new boxing, promotional. Well, he does co-own a promotional company. There's a lot of things that guys can do with that kind of cash. All right, let's get into Dragon Ball Daima. It's hard to find ways to pivot from boxing to anime, but we're gonna try here, okay? So episode 6, it featured primarily Glorio, the individual that Goku has been traveling with, the blue guy. Goku and Glorio fought in this episode. We also got some interesting reveals in terms of who Glorio works for. We also got some information about the Supreme Kai. That was interesting. And the internet meme of Goku being one of the most disrespectful people in the world when he's stronger than you is very, very relevant here. So episode 6 features at least 2 different occasions of Goku doing poop jokes, of him having to use the bathroom. We also learned that Goku skips showers and he doesn't wash his hands after he poops, which was very important information that we needed to know. This is the kind of stuff that I dislike about the future Dragon Ball stuff, is this kind of shit. It makes Goku seem like, I mean, I understand he was born like in the mountains, or born in the mountains. He was raised in the mountains and all that kind of stuff. But this sort of stuff actually takes away some of his cool factor, which is, should be protected. And he can be a little ditzy, but the idea that he's just like showers, I never kissed my wife. What is this? And that's all that stuff is not necessary. I hate that shit. But we learned that the Supreme Kai, he is a Glend that was born on the Glend tree. It used to be called the Kaiju tree. And that they do not have genders, that there are not male and female when it comes to Glens. So the Supreme Kai is technically not a male. Degisu, his brother, his sibling, is technically not a male. Arinsu, his sister, also sibling, is certainly or technically not a female. That was an interesting reveal. It makes sense in terms of them being an alien species that does not reproduce through sex. It will be similar with the Nameks, where all Nameks are male. There are no female Nameks. Like that's an oddball thing, Like the male Nameks lay eggs. So the Supreme Kai is essentially a living plant. He only drinks, he doesn't eat. But plants have genders. Plants have male and female. I mean, he's an alien, so you can say, okay, well, he's an alien and a godlike creature. He's a deity. He doesn't really need a gender, but we have to call him something. So I guess that's why they say, for all practical purposes, he's a male or presents male, and Degisu presents male, and Arinsu presents as female, because I guess you have to be something. It's an interesting piece of the world. Yeah, Toriyama's whole thing is fart jokes and turds and stuff. He has a very Vince McMahon, sense of humor, where it's all poop and offensive stuff. Like original Dragon Ball is something that would probably pop Vince as being hilarious, but it doesn't really age well in terms of people who get offended by certain things. And then you also take into account that once Goku has been, positioned as being a very cool character, and plus he's a character in his 40s and 50s at this point. The fact that he is weird like this it takes away. It was cute when he was a kid, but it's not really cute now. It's strange. We learned that Pansy has one of those collars that Goma puts on all of the denizens in the third demon world. She actually has one, but she hides it under her scarf. So I don't remember her dad having one, and I don't remember any of her father's soldiers having one. So it might be a thing where she was traveling outside of the castle and got caught, and they put one of those collars on her. So it's interesting. Maybe I ought to go back and watch episode 5 to see if her father was wearing one. But I don't think he was. But she certainly has one. So that's another little Easter egg right there that most people didn't catch. So that was interesting. Arinsu is Glorio's boss. He works for her. Remember, Glorio, now things are starting to come together. It's not heavy on action, but it's heavy on story. Glorio told the gang that he was sent by somebody who was important to defeat Goma. Then he told Panzi's father that he was going to bring somebody that was strong enough to defeat Majin Buu. It all led to believe that he was sent by Panzi's father, but it's the opposite. He told him he was going to bring him somebody. And this means that Dr. Arinsu who we also know went to the living world, or the outside world as they call it, prior to Goma going to the outside world. So that means Arensu has been to the outside world, knew of Goku and all of these people, and then sent Glorio to get them. Interesting. This is interesting stuff, because now we have to figure out whether Glorio is a good guy or a bad guy. You know, right now they're doing a really good job of keeping it neutral, and this leads to the big fight scene later on. Well, it doesn't really lead there, because the only person who knows that Glorio was talking to Arensu is the Supreme Kai, because he's been suspicious of Glorio this entire time, and he was eavesdropping on that conversation, but he hasn't said anything yet. He's just collecting information. He's just noticing. He's been a professional noticer. But they after their vehicle crashes and they're looking around, Goku's pooping and they're being chased by the Gundam Array and all this kind of stuff, and all of a sudden here comes this Minotaur who wants to eat them. It ends up being like a gag though, because the Minotaur, Glorio wants to fight the Minotaur, Goku wants to fight the Minotaur. Glorio is kind of tired of Goku disrespecting him, not saying his name properly, and he says like, "Oh, you're doing this on purpose." Like he's got an attitude because Goku keeps slipping up how to pronounce his name. Then we have the fight. Glorio he thinks Goku is super arrogant. Goku is cocky, doesn't really care, doesn't care to pronounce his name correctly, overlooking him. He's like, "You think you're better than me?" And Goku is like, respectfully, "I kind of am." Like, I'm very, okay, so Pansy's father had the collar. Okay, cool. That maybe I wasn't paying attention. All right. But Glorio wants to prove himself that Goku is not that much stronger than he is. So they decide to fight. And it was funny because Goku says, "Oh, I want to fight with one hand tied behind my back." And Glorio can't punch him, can't kick him, can't do anything. But Glorio uses magic. And we found out that Glorio uses lightning magic. And so Goku is surprised by the lightning magic. Supreme Kai tells Goku, "Oh, take this seriously. I want to see what Glorio can do." So Goku does take this a little bit more seriously, including transforming to a Super Saiyan. Glorio throws his most powerful shot, and Goku just destroys it by touching it. And that was it. Then he vamped behind Glorio, put his hand in the middle of his back, and was like, "It looks like I win." And Glorio was like, "All right, you got me." So at first I thought Goku is disrespectful as fuck. He's cocky as shit, like he embarrassed Glorio a little bit. But also, once this happened after we found out about Dr. Arensu and Glorio's relationship, that they were, that they're in cahoots. So then you have to beg the question: is Glorio, does this challenge that he's put forth towards Goku, was it really about Goku being disrespectful and arrogant, or is this part of his job? Is to find out how powerful Goku really is, and this challenge was a way of trying to see how powerful Goku really is. That would explain a lot, you know. We can see that Glorio barely could survive fighting Goku in base form, as when Goku flew and hit him with the Yoibo, he was pretty much, well, he wasn't finished completely by that, but he was bad off even after that. But I thought maybe, and this is just a little conspiracy theory, that Glorio might have been sandbagging a little bit, that they haven't seen how powerful Goku really is because he's never had to show them. The Supreme Kai telling Goku to fight seriously is probably what Gloria wanted to see, rather, because something tells me that part of his job is figuring out how powerful these guys really are. How strong are they really? What can they really do? And Glorio finds out about Super Saiyans, and then he asks Goku, like, oh, I guess you could have a bunch of other tricks too. And he says, well, yeah. So now Glorio knows more about Goku, and he's learning more. And we know that he's in conversation with Dr. Arinsu. So he's likely just reporting to her everything he knows about Goku's power level and his strengths, but it would be interesting to me, and I don't know, they haven't said this yet, if Goku and the gang can't sense magic. Like, that would be fun, because it would put the gang at a disadvantage. If they couldn't sense magic, it would be fun, but I don't know if they can or can't. But Goku clearly has some level of understanding that he was more powerful than Glorio, and it showed it. So maybe he tried to sense Glorio's ki, but Glorio doesn't really know what that is, or what they call it. In their world they call it magic. The episode was better than most of the episodes before it. The pace was a lot quicker. The Minotaur jokes was actually funny. I could have done without all the poop stuff. The reveals of the Supreme Kai not having a gender was interesting. I guess he still presents as male, so I guess you got to call him a male. But I'm more interested in the Arinsu Glorio stuff, and what Glorio is up to in terms of reporting to Arinsu. J Reaction says Joe Louis is originally from Alabama. Okay, I knew it was some southern state. Has anybody ever written a really good biography on Joe Louis? I think somebody has, but I don't think I've ever read it. Like, I read a couple of books on Muhammad Ali, and I need to probably read a full. Like, I have a graphic novel about Jack Johnson, but I would like to have like a book. Like, I like reading about boxing. So that's Gloria. I mean, that's Dragon Ball Daima. It was a solid enough episode, man. It was pretty good. So Absolute Batman #2 came out this week as well. Where Alfred is continuing his investigation of Black Mask and the party animals who are decimating Gotham. And he's also maintaining his surveillance on Bruce. We found out that Bruce's mother is still alive. We knew that from issue 1. Only his father had died in a random shooting at a museum or a field trip or something. We learned that Batman's friends are going to end up being the rogues gallery for this universe. So he has a friend that constantly flips a coin. He likes to gamble. Obviously, that's going to be Two-Face. He has a friend that's really smart. He has like a question mark around his neck. So that's pretty obvious. He's going to end up being the Riddler. And you kind of see that this is they do so many of these alternate universe Batmans that it's really difficult to really care about them. Because the last one that really caught a lot of people's attention was Batman the White Knight, Sean Gordon Murphy, which was an excellently drawn piece of business. And people were really into it for like the first book and maybe the first 2 books. And then it kind of went off into, people were just not really all that interested anymore. I don't think I've ever read the entire first volume of Batman the White Knight. Maybe I ought to get that for myself for Christmas. But Absolute Batman feels like that to me. It's a fun alternate reality with great art, but it's fun comics. But it's like I'm not getting anything special out of this. It's like I really don't care. It doesn't. It moves along. Batman is still excessively violent. Now him and Alfred are going to work together. He's got all these tanks and all this equipment, but he's a regular carpenter or something. Like, so how is he affording all this shit? Where's all this stuff coming from? These are all going to be questions they're going to, reveal later. The issue was good. I think I liked it. But a lot of the alternate universe Batman stuff, it probably will read and feel better collected. Reading it issue by issue is not really my thing. I usually, if I'm going to read something alternate universe Batman, I'm going to read it in a trade. And that's typically, I guess, how this is going to have to be. Maybe I'll get the trade of Absolute Batman, but I'm going to keep up with it just in case they do something stupid in it. and I can, easily drop it because I'm not paying for this. I've been reading this stuff online. So, I liked it, though. I think that if you're a big Batman fan, you will like Absolute Batman 1 and 2. If you like alternate universes, especially alternate universe Batman, you will like Absolute Batman 1 and 2. For me, it's okay. It's enjoyable. I like White Knight better though, but this isn't over yet. I like the first volume of White Knight better. All right, I read The Last Ronin 2, the re-evolution, and I know a lot of other people aren't really talking about this, especially in the comic book space. Nobody really talks about The Last Ronin 2. Like, The Last Ronin, for those of you who are in the know, is a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles story from a couple of years ago, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, that featured one turtle surviving the battle with the Foot Clan. He's aged, he's older, and he returns to New York to finish the war against the Foot Clan. Spoilers, it's Michelangelo. So Michelangelo is the final turtle who survives. And we've done The Last Ronin, and we've also done The Last Ronin, The Lost Years, where we learn what Michelangelo was doing while his brothers were I think it's after his brothers were killed, but before he returned to New York. So we learn what he's been doing all those years, which is basically fighting this guy Death Worm across Europe and China and shit. And then you have The Last Ronin 2, which is the re-evolution. Now, in the first Last Ronin book, you see that Casey Jones and April O'Neil have a daughter. Her name is Casey Jones. There it is, right? Simple. Casey Jones has turtles that her and April are trying to mutate. And they mutate them at the end of the series after Michelangelo dies. And you find out in The Last Ronin 2, the re-evolution, that these turtles, there's 4 of them, 2 male and 2 female, that these turtles were mutated using Michelangelo's DNA. So these are technically his children. Technically. And the re-evolution is showing how these new mutated turtles are developing special powers. Each one of them is developing a secondary mutation. So not only are they mutant turtles, but now they're mutant turtles with special powers. 2 of them have revealed their powers already. One of them has like a telekinesis, and another one has the ability to turn their body into like a hardened stone, kind of thing. The art is fantastic, with the exception of the artistic element of April O'Neil. Yes, she's older, but she looks like an old man because they insist on going with April being a butch with short hair and all this kind of weird shit. The new turtles haven't really grown on me. Uh, the release schedule has been so infrequent with Last Ronin 2 that I keep forgetting it even exists, and I know a lot of other people do too. But the new turtles haven't really grown on me. I have not really taken their names to memory, but all of them have the name One, but it's in different languages. Like, one is named Uno, one is named Moja, another one is named Odin. Like each one of them have like the name One. That's the theme. But they don't really have a lot of discernible personalities. They're trying, but it's hard to really care about them. The big issue that we have here is that the villains are incredibly nebulous. I'm still not. The villains are kind of like warring gangs. Like once the Foot Clan fell and everything goes to chaos, there is now a bunch of wars between all these different gangs for control in New York. That's sort of the backdrop of all of this. But nobody really stands out as like a Shredder or a Karai or that kind of figure in this story. It might have been better for them to use like a classic Turtles villain like Krang or the Triceratons or something like that in order for us to fall back on in terms of, okay, the Foot Clan's out of the way now, but we can bring in these guys who are sort of classic villains. Probably would have been a little bit better, but they decided to go with just random gangs. I'm like, okay, so now they're just fighting like random people in the street. It's a decent series. If you like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, it's okay. It ain't the best. I typically think that Jason Aaron is doing a better job with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles right now. I read the first 3 volumes. His Leonardo volume, I shouldn't say volume, I should say book actually. The Leonardo chapter is probably the worst one yet because it's all about Leonardo and his relationship to real turtles, which is like, okay, I guess. But it's okay. It's good. It's just not as good as the Michelangelo issue or the Raphael issue. And I think he's doing better than this re-evolution thing because the re-evolution thing is, a weird situation here. Beep says, are they going to turn Usagi Yojimbo into Yasuke? Here's the thing. Usagi Yojimbo is a completely different property. Everybody thinks Usagi Yojimbo is a part of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and he's not. He's owned by a completely different guy. He just does crossovers with TMNT. They did a crossover earlier this year. A Saturday morning cartoon, Usagi Yojimbo TMNT crossover. It was a fun romp for kids. I don't really like the Saturday morning cartoon version of TMNT. It's a little childlike for me. But he did a crossover with them in that. So that was cool. So that's pretty much it in terms of all the stuff that I've consumed lately. Next week will probably be a little bit more interesting as I will have read the first volume of Kagurabachi and My Hero Academia 39, and I would have finished Parasite, by then. WG Field said, did you watch my suggestions of Abara Ranger and Deca Ranger on Discord? I've been watching the Deca Ranger. I'm on episode 7 of that. It's okay. I like the character designs. The idea of them being police officers investigating like all this space stuff is interesting to me. That's what kind of kept me watching it. I really don't like the characters though. Like I'm not really like into the characters yet. But what really popped me is when, the Red Ranger punched the Blue. I mean, the Blue Ranger punched the Red Ranger in the face. Like that was great. Like I was all in when I saw that because it's very rare that you see these guys getting into it like that. Once the Blue Ranger hauled off and punched him in the face, I was like, oh, this is interesting. Let's see where this goes. I haven't watched an episode of Supernatural in several days though, either. But I've been I watched a little bit of the Deca Ranger. I haven't even looked at the other one yet, but I checked out Deca Ranger because you said it was like a cop procedural, and it is. It's like they're doing like real investigations and stuff. It just happens to have Power Rangers, you know, stuff that goes with it, which I like, but I really don't care about the characters. And the most recent episode I saw was the one where the plants are pulling the water from the air and watering other plants. They have plant aliens, which I think is very fucking cool. I'm always a big fan of plant aliens or plant people. It's always interesting. If there's anything else, I don't think so. I don't think there's anything else to be had here. J Reaction, I'm gonna answer this question and I'll get out of here. He says, who lost worse in the month of November, Kamala Harris or Mike Tyson, despite the fact their fans swore they would win? Well, Kamala Harris was probably more likely to win than Mike Tyson. I think a lot of Mike Tyson fans were watching those training videos, which I didn't watch any of them. A lot of Mike Tyson fans were riding on hope and were fooled by the training videos. The Kamala Harris fans truly believed that there was energy behind her and that people actually liked her, when a lot of those people that were there were just there because they were paying celebrities to be there. I mean, it is what it is. Got to call a spade a spade. It was fake. It was phony. It was fugazi. Both of them was a situation where it looked on the outside like they had a chance, but if you knew anything, you knew they didn't have a chance at all. The difference being is that Kamala Harris actually did have a chance. She blew it by being a terrible candidate, not having any ideas, of being an empty suit. Mike Tyson is 58 years old. Again, Jake Paul would have had to been a moron to lose that fight. Or Mike Tyson would have had to turn back the clock and land one solid punch. But there was less chance of that happening than of Kamala Harris becoming president. So there's that, I think. Yeah, I will say this: Mike Tyson got paid. He got a bag, so everything turned out fine. It turned out roses for him. All right, y'all. I appreciate everybody stopping by. I'll talk to you guys later.